trial is underway in France that is sparking debate far beyond the courtroom and will shape the future of the Church, for better or worse. In fact, what is being examined before the Previous Correctional Court is not a moral scandal nor a case of physical violence or abuse, but the very way of living the Catholic religious life. This is the element that makes the proceedings against the Famille Missionnaire de Notre Dame a potentially decisive step in the relationship between state and church in France. The trial opened on January 19, 2026, and concluded, as far as hearings were concerned, on January 22nd. The verdict is expected on March 24th. The defendants are the community's founder and superior, Father Bernard Pinede, and the community itself as a legal entity. The charge is single, but serious: abuse of weakness, a crime under French criminal law that punishes the exploitation of a person's psychological vulnerability. It's important to clarify this from the outset because it's a key fact of the case. The prosecution doesn't allege physical violence, abuse, illicit enrichment, or financial fraud. There are no minor victims and no material criminal acts. The entire proceeding revolves around an interpretation of spiritual and community practices considered by the prosecution to be instruments of psychological control. The case stems from a preliminary investigation launched in 2021, following complaints filed by 5 former members of the community and a report from Miviludes, the government body responsible for monitoring so-called sectarian tendencies. It is from this intertwining of individual testimonies and state assessments that the accusatory system arises. According to the prosecutor's office, the community allegedly implemented a series of practices aimed at reducing the personal autonomy of its members, especially the youngest. Among the elements cited are the control or supervision of communications with families, the limitation of telephone calls and outside visits, and a highly regulated community life. All aspects presented as functional to a progressive isolation from the external environment. A second line of accusation concerns spiritual formation. Testimonies from some former members speak of very frequent confessions, repeated moral corrections, and teachings focused on sin, hell, and the presence of the devil. The prosecution claims that these elements, although belonging to religious language, were used in such a way as to generate feelings of guilt, fear, and psychological dependence. A third point concerns the profile of the members who joined the community. Many were young adults, often under 20. According to the prosecution, this age indicates a particular psychological fragility and a reduced capacity for critical thinking, making it easier to exert undue influence. The defense completely rejects this interpretation. It reiterates that entry into the community was voluntary, that no one was held against their will, and that anyone could leave freely. The contested practices are described as ordinary elements of Catholic religious life: obedience, discipline, detachment from the world, spiritual direction, frequent confession. It is also recalled that the community has a statute recognized by the ecclesiastical authority and that its form of life is neither clandestine nor secret. Current members and family members also testified during the trial, describing the experience as liberating and spiritually fruitful. The key issue at this point is no longer simply determining whether abuse occurred in this specific case, but understanding where the state intends to draw the line between protecting individuals and judging the forms of religious life. It is here that the process takes on a significance that goes beyond the mere judicial reporting. Because what is being questioned is not obvious criminal behavior, but a spiritual structure, community life, obedience to a superior, the renunciation of full individual autonomy, separation from the world. Elements that, in the Catholic tradition, are constitutive of consecrated life, are reinterpreted with psychological and penal categories. The crime of abuse of weakness, created to protect the elderly, the sick, or those in situations of evident fragility, is applied to young adults who have chosen a religious vocation. This transition marks a significant change. It's no longer just the act that's being judged, but the entire spiritual context in which it occurs. The risk, highlighted by several observers, is that a principle is introduced whereby any form of strong religious authority could be suspected of coercion. In this context, the distinction between spiritual guidance and psychological manipulation becomes increasingly blurred and entrusted to criteria external to religious tradition. This is not to deny that real abuse can exist, nor to minimize the suffering of those who claim to have had negative experiences. The point, however, is another. Can the state establish which elements of Catholic doctrine are psychologically legitimate and which are not? Can a criminal court evaluate the frequency of confession or the content of sermons? The French case fits into a broader context in which the notion of religious freedom appears to be progressively redefined. No longer the freedom to fully live one's faith, but freedom conditioned by psychological and cultural parameters established by civil authorities. The verdict expected in March won't settle this debate. Whatever the court's decision, the precedent is now open. For the first time, a recognized Catholic community is being judged so explicitly not for what it has done, but for what it is, for its lifestyle, for its vision of man, for its way of understanding obedience and vocation. This is the aspect that worries many ecclesial circles, because today it is a missionary community. Tomorrow it could be a monastery, a seminary, a contemplative congregation. When religious life is translated into criminal language, the boundary between protection and control becomes extremely fragile. The Previs trial is therefore not just a judicial affair, it is a signal. And like any signal, it deserves to be observed carefully, without slogans, but also without naivety. Because what's at stake isn't just a ruling, but the very future of religious freedom in a society that seems increasingly inclined to tolerate faith only on condition that it isn't too demanding, too radical, or too true. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment, Amen. God bless you.